cool. So, welcome to Brolosophy. We have Chris Smith on the show. Chris is director of Big ESports.
That's all.
Something that I know very little about. So, Chris, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and kind of what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I've been around in the esports and gaming industry for just over a decade now, and I've kind of sat on all six sides of the fence, I like to say. So I started off, as many people do, as a top-level player, played a few games in top teams, took a liking to commentary. So I tried out for a commentary company called Netgame Radio, which was all online, like an online radio station, basically. Did a bunch of commentary through them, and as happens a bit in the industry, I had a guy I was working with, and said, hey, I'm a graphics designer and a distributor for a tech company. This tech company wants to launch a new line of products into the space, and they want to run a $30,000 tournament. I'm the only gamer they know, so they told me I have to do it. Can you please help me? And I said, right. All right, I also know nothing, but let's give it a crack and let's try it out. So that was kind of my entry into the professional side of the industry, I guess. And the company I worked for liked what I did, offered me a job, moved up from Tassie, where I grew up to Victoria here in 2011. Worked for them for a few years doing PR and marketing and community management in that space. And quite often, community manager is a code word for underpaid marketing manager. So I did the hard yards there for a while, did a bit of everything, managed one of Australia's first professional players over that period of time. It was a sponsor, did keynote speeches, did trade shows, events, expos, running my own tournaments, and was a semi-pro player as well at that same time. The things you can do when you're 19 and have a lot of energy. And then I moved into becoming a journo for about a year and a half, covering tech products. Kind of semi-left the industry, I guess, studied social work as well throughout that time. And then I got headhunted back into the industry to do a very similar position at a US company, and then ended up leaving to go out on my own. So you can probably tell from the amount of different things I've done is I don't like to be locked down to one thing necessarily.
No, you're a real floater.
Yeah, which seems a bit similar to you, right? It's like the action, the excitement. It's hard to be, just attached to one brand, one company, unless you own the brand or the company.
Yeah, still though. Still. I have Athena, and I'm like, I want to start a subscription dog food business. I want to start a glamping business with my brother. And I'm pretty similar, I think. I just like to be excited by things. I guess you probably do too. New challenges and it's like, I've just started bouldering around the corner. It's a new skill and a new sport. I'm like, this is great, and I'll probably move on from that in a month's time to something else.
Exactly.
But all right, cool. So you grew up in Tassie. So what's your background? You come from a big family, small family. Were you a sporty kid? Were you a gamer kid?
Only child.
Yeah.
And I guess I sat in the middle, which is becoming much more of a common thing now, where I played cricket every single day, loved sports, I loved playing soccer as well. However, I also equally love playing video games, and there's nowhere for you to sit. Most of my gamer mates hated sports, they hated going outside, they hated any kind of physical education.
Really one or the other, weren't you?
Yeah, and they were the very cliche of basement nerds, as you affectionately call them. Whereas, then you don't get along with the jocks because you like to play video games. You don't dress the same way they do. You don't like all the same things. I don't care about certain things they care about too. So sitting in the middle. So for me, I was born in Queensland. Family's from Queensland. Moved down to Tassie about kindergarten, then back to Queensland, back to Tassie again.
Oh, really?
Did most of my schooling in Tasmania, which is a great place to grow up. Terrible place to live unless you work for the government, then it's all right. Because there's not much to do.
Why the back and forth?
It's a crazy story. Basically, my parents were in a Christian organisation that they thought, after, 10, 15 years, they went, I think this is a cult. And they left.
And then they went back.
No, well, basically they moved to Tasmania with it, went back to Queensland, lived with my family, because when you leave a cult, you don't have any money. You don't have a job, you don't have any money.
Yeah, you don't have any actual real concept of the world either.
Exactly, yeah. So it was a semi-cult. They got some good professional qualifications out of it, but, as with these things, they're messy. But then we moved back to Tassie. My dad grew up in Longreach, which is 1,000 k's inland from Brisbane.
Gotcha.
And I think he got sick of 44 degrees every day during the summer, so they wanted to go somewhere the opposite. He much prefers the cold.
Yeah, really? He's one of those weirdos.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. Yeah, sweet. So Tassie was great. Yeah, I've been meaning to get down to Tassie. I just hear amazing things. My dad did a big motorbike tour around Tasmania. One of my best buddies was hassling me to go do this over 3-night hike down there. The 3 Caples hike. I don't know what it was called, actually. I think that's what it was called. But it's supposed to be a beautiful part of the world.
It's
very
crazy.
Reminiscent of New Zealand from like what people tell me. And New Zealand's outstanding.
Yeah, I'd say it's a mini New Zealand without the natural disasters, because there's zero there. You don't get, besides a little bit of flooding that really kills no one and gets rid of no houses. There's no fires, there's no earthquakes, there's nothing. Yeah. No cyclones, nothing down there.
Yeah, that's great. Because we're pretty lucky in Australia, but we just get everything lights up. At the drop of a hat, which sucks, you know. But we're pretty good natural disasters wise. I think Australia, we're pretty lucky.
Yeah.
And the Kiwis get shaken left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
But you reckon Tassie's where it's at?
Yeah.
Safest place in the world.
So it probably is, you know. But also because there's not many people there. And I mean,
that's right.
A fun fact: I did Air Force cadets for about 6 years as a kid. And I mean, the wildlife. There's not as many spiders in Tasmania. There's not as many things except. From my understanding, yeah, of course. But from my understanding, is every single snake in Tasmania is poisonous.
Yeah.
But in all my years in cadets, going way out into the bush, doing survival courses and stuff, I didn't see a snake once.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's too cold there.
They're all deadly, but there's like 6 of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they're spread out. You know their names and where they live. So just don't go knocking.
That's right. Yeah, sweet. Oh, that's cool. So, take me back to like becoming. You said you were a gamer and but you're also a bit sporty. I was quite similar actually. I think we would have been. I was not really so much of a gamer, but I was a real comic book nerd. But I was like obsessed with football and trying to play AFL and all that kind of stuff. Yep. So I know where you're talking about. I know the meeting point there.
Yeah.
So, but obviously, we all played video games. How come you ended up playing professional video games?
It was a lot of it was I fell into it by accident, like most people do. Because I had that competitive nature. Mm-hmm. Like in regards to cricket, I used to play every recess and lunch every day, and then I'd bowl down my driveway at night time. Wanting to be a great player. Uh-huh. But with video games as well, I started playing first-person shooters, so namely a game called Battlefield 2 for a while. I started off as most people do as a 15, 14-year-old. You're pretty terrible. You pick a sniper class, you sit on a roof, and, you just kind of fluff around a little bit. Mm-hmm. But then I started thinking, when I started becoming a bit better, I started thinking, well, how can I test my skills against someone else? How can I show that I'm the best Battlefield 2 player, I'm the better sniper, I'm better at this certain map or this class or whatever than someone else? So there was a thing in-game where you could set a clan tag, which is basically, that's an early esports organization. People would just play under the same tag together. Mm-hmm. They might play in some casual comps, and I didn't know what that meant. And I used to go in the same server every night, which was always on the same map and the same style of game because that was my favorite. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy there that used to go there most nights as well that had a clan tag on. And I just asked him, I was like, A, how are you so good? B, what does a clan tag mean? Mm-hmm. And C, what does your clan tag mean? Mm-hmm. So then we started talking and then started going from there, and he educated me on the competitive scene. Gotcha.
All right. So how old are you, Chris?
I'm 28.
28. Yeah, I'm only 33. I'm just trying to think, because when I was coming up, this competitive gaming wasn't really a thing.
Correct.
Like I was of the firstly like Super Mario and so forth and Alex the Kid into like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter and maybe Doom and so forth was around that time. And then I guess I must have just missed the wave of real competitive, more so than just sitting in your lounge room playing against your best mate.
Yeah.
So when did that all actually hit the scene? The actual online competitive nature.
You could say it's in two different bits, right? So there was like an esports scene that was starting to become a thing before the global financial crisis, for example. So thinking back to like, I can't remember exactly what the year was, but it might have been like 05 or 03. There's Quake, which is developed by id Software. John Carmack, the CEO, was a massive Ferrari fan, and he loved to chuck turbos on Ferraris, which is the massive thing apparently you just don't do with those cars.
Okay.
But he ran a global tournament, and the first place prize was his twin turbo Ferrari that he gave away to someone. He gave that to the guy that won, and the guy couldn't afford the insurance, couldn't afford to register it. So he went to an ATM, this is the story, got out a bunch of money, gave it to him and said, here you go. Really? And he also couldn't afford to ship it home to himself either. So there was that, and even thinking about the Championship Gaming Series in 07-08, that was a studio-like environment. It was televised. There was a salaried team from Australia called Sydney Underground, a team from London, Chicago.
And this was in-house? They flew in for the tournament, or was it all online?
Yeah, so it was all in-house. It was in the US.
Gotcha.
There was reportedly some commentators making $1 million salary to play. It was live audience. Flames coming up, pay TV, all that kind of stuff.
Really?
But that fell down partly due to lavish overspending and also partly due to the GFC.
Yeah,
They kind of seemed to kick everything down. But, I mean, it's been going along a while in the underground sense, but you could say almost like as far as the mainstream world is concerned, 2019 is probably the first year of esports that it's existed on a global scale, where you've got people that are actually earning some serious money, and not just the people who are the 0.01%, but maybe the 1%, which is very similar to sport, right? Everybody likes to make the comparison between esports and traditional sports, and likes to make the comparison of earnings. But, you know, if you're a VFL player, you're not earning good money, and you're most likely working at the same time as well.
For sure you are.
The same way that if you're an esports player, if you're not in the top 8 teams in the world for a certain game, you're probably not earning much money either.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember, maybe it is, 2019, because I think it was probably this year that I heard the first conversation on, I would say it would have been another podcast. I think I know which podcast it was, but talking about the fact that now we're at the period where it used to be, you know, your mum would say, hey, go outside or go kick the football, or, you know, your parents would be very pushing you into trying to do well at sport and so on and so forth. Yeah. Whereas now, you might be an extremely elite esports player, and your parents might be like, all right, cool, well, go to your room and fucking get on that video game. You know, it might be something that people are actually pushing their kids into because they're talented at it.
Yeah.
Is that probably, you think that's kind of just been a recent thing the last couple of years where it's been a realistic life plan?
Yeah, even for me, like a lot of my business is conducted on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And I've got inbounds from mothers and fathers now saying, hey, I think my kid might have some serious skill and he really wants to take Fortnite seriously.
LinkedIn. I thought it would have been TikTok.
Not quite.
Your business. That's funny.
And then it's, you know, for them, it's about how can I support my child to become a better player? And, you know, for me, it's similar answers to like what you were saying. You know, my mum always used to yell at me to get off the computer, tell me I could never get a job in the industry. And now I've been working in the industry for, like 8+ years or something like that. Exactly. Yeah, showed you. With a small stint in social work, which is her profession. So she won for a little bit. And then I came back. But yeah, it's exactly about that. It's about like identifying the youngsters as they're coming up.
So what are we talking in terms of like the growth of esports? Because before this show, I like to come in pretty fresh to ideas in the show. I like to, because that's how the audience of the listeners are normally. They haven't researched, a whole lot about said guest or whatever the field is. But I also do a little bit of research, in preparation. And I remember reading a bunch of reports and so forth on the rise of esports. So what are we actually talking? Like, how many people are actually playing esports? How much people are playing video games in comparison to 20 years ago? Like, what does it actually look like?
Sure. So the first thing to denote is the difference between esports and gaming. Yeah. So if you take the difference between sport and a leisure activity and then transpose that to esports as sports and leisure activity as gaming. Yep. So if you're just kicking a footy with your mates down at the beach, that's not sport. You're more just having a bit of fun.
Real competitive.
Exactly. The same way that if you're just playing Candy Crush at home, Minecraft, Fortnite, whatever, playing on your mobile, on a PlayStation, on Xbox, on a PC, you're not participating in esports unless there's some sort of structure behind it.
Yep, for sure.
So if you're even competing in Wednesday night mixed netball with a team, you still paid an entry fee. Yep. You're still going to win something. It's still a ladder. Yep. So it's still a sport. The same way that if you're in the gym doing squats, lifting weights, to jump higher, to run faster for footy, that's still participating in the whole ecosystem of sport. The same way that if you were doing aim practice, muscle memory, or you were studying replays to look at strategy to become a better player. So esports is one section of the gaming market. So you've got so many different games that are and aren't esports. Like, for example, Angry Birds, that's not an esport. There's no big competitors. You can't play really against someone. Yep. It's not a game that has a high skill ceiling. Yep. Whereas with esports, you've got some games that are pure esports, maybe a game like Quake Live or Quake Champions, maybe a game like Counter-Strike that's very focused towards esports. Or you've got some that blur the lines a little bit, like Fortnite, that a lot of the younger people are playing. There's even some Minecraft competitive aspects in there. Other games like Overwatch and League of Legends that pander to both sides of the audience. So as far as, a bit of an idea in the global market, the global games market as a whole total available market is larger than movies and music combined.
What?
There are games out there, for example, I made a LinkedIn post this morning about Roblox, which is a mobile game, which is once again gaming. It's mainly aimed at kids who aren't even into Minecraft yet, so quite young kids. That's made $1 billion revenue in the past 2016 when it came out. So the past 3 years, $1 billion revenue, 67%-ish of that is from the US. There's other games like Corinthians Free Fire, which is a mobile game, super popular in Southeast Asia, super popular in Brazil. Global finals for that just happened. The team that won has 700,000 followers on Instagram. There's other things like Ninja, who's the streamer that everybody knows, who's easily making, or in his prime, was easily making over 1.2 mil a month in revenue. He was sponsored by Uber Eats, sponsored by Bonds with a line of undies coming out.
And this is just streaming him playing video games?
Correct, yep.
On YouTube?
Yep,
Live streaming?
Or YouTube, Twitch, whatever. Yeah, yep. YouTube videos, Twitch, across on Instagram, Twitter, all that kind of follow through as well. So those are some of the larger numbers. I mean, there's even another mobile game which I posted.
Hey, can I go back to one thing you said? Because I just want to, before I forget it, I know you got heaps more you want to just keep riffing on about, but I wanted to go back to...
lots of numbers.
I want to go back to... you said the esports or the gaming in total industry is bigger than movies...
Video games.
Video games is bigger than movies and music combined.
Correct.
Since when?
That's a good question. I have to look that up. But it's...
That's an incredible statistic.
Yeah, definitely.
That is mental.
And I think it's the fact that it's overlooked all the time because... I mean, if you look at it from the standpoint of these companies, it's the older people that are in charge that haven't grown up with this. So I'll use a direct example. I took a bit of time to talk to some politicians in Victoria. Yep. I went to meet with Matthew Guy, who used to be the Liberal, who they used to hold a seat here in Melbourne or Victoria. And I could see his brain figuring out the process when I was talking to him about gaming and opportunities related in that and how governments could become involved. And he was saying that basically, he's like, yeah, actually, my kid plays Minecraft, and every time all of his friends come over, all they want to do is play Minecraft. And while the parent often has it in their mind that, this is just a silly game that just my one child plays, they start to realize that actually every single parent I know, all they do is talk about how much their kids want to play Minecraft and Fortnite. Maybe there isn't an audience here. And maybe the fact that I need to buy a new console every year for my kid for Christmas, maybe all the other parents have to as well.
Yeah, it's like five young kids times 2 or 3 days a week of like 5 hours of engagement each. If you turn that into like movie watching or social media engagement or whatever, that's a huge amount of attention. Really, attention is where it's at. You know, what are we paying attention to? That's what's going to make the most money. So if you break it down like that, and I guess it's the stuff that you don't see. You don't see kids. It's all, younger age brackets. So in my life, in my line of work, in my day-to-day, I don't see people sitting playing video games at all, But that's an incredible stat. So... But talk to me. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I am interested again in something you just said so sitting down and talking to government. So when you sit down and broach that topic, okay, guys, hey, here's what we want to put forward, and we want to grow the sport of esports. Where are the opportunities for governments to jump in?
There's so many in it. I mean, it's the same thing with brands. So for my business, primarily what we try to do is bring new companies into the industry. And I just say companies as a catch-all, so you can include governments, you can include investors, include brands, anything in there, and try to educate them on ways to enter the market. So one of the biggest government supporters in the world is the state of Georgia in the US. So I just did a podcast with the CEO of a games development studio called Hi-Res. They have 450 employees there, and they just built, I think it was about a $10 million studio and facility to run an esports league out of. The government back end funds 30 cents of every dollar for that. So because of that, they've now got that 450-person games development studio, plus now a whole league, of which there's an Australia team that plays in there that I think just placed 3rd or 4th. So they've all flown over from Australia to live in Atlanta now too. So bringing economic advantage there. Plus this morning I did a podcast with Ali Young, the CEO and founder of Access Replay. They're also based in Atlanta as well. Massive esports facility with 50+ computers, plus a bar and a full restaurant, all based around gaming and esports. So bringing in the old standard, the Liberal Party think of jobs and growth. I mean, that's some of the very standard one. The other part as well is tourism and bringing big events in here. So the Victorian government, Visit Victoria, they support the MotoGP. They support things in the cricket. They support things in the footy. They also support the Melbourne Esports Open. So when the Melbourne Esports Open happens, that's in the Melbourne Olympic Park precinct across Rod Laver, Margaret Court Arena and the Melbourne Arena. And it's all about gaming. It's all about esports throughout that whole time. And they support that with funding too. And that's employed to get people to fly, whether it's from other states, whether it's from overseas, to come in as well to bring the tourism money into the local space.
Far out. That's mind-boggling. So, okay, here's a random question for you. Why do people like gaming so much? Because obviously we have... it's similar to, obviously, people getting stuck in their phones, I feel like, and all the flashy lights and so on and so forth that's grabbing your attention out of the real life and day-to-day.
Yeah.
Because... let's be honest, half the people listening to this podcast probably grew up and most of their time was spent outside riding their bikes, throwing a ball, kicking the footy, going for a surf, whatever.
Yep.
And then half probably, were of the age where video games were quite big and quite a, part of their culture and society. Why is it so big? Why is it growing so fast? What is the attraction scientifically? Why are people so drawn to it?
I think for esports specifically, one of the great things is that it's a participatory sport.
Yeah.
So when the AFL Grand Final is on, I don't see a lot of my friends, even the ones that like AFL, going and signing up for the local footy club, going and even kicking the footy necessarily. My partner's family, they've been Sydney Swans fans since the Swans were a Melbourne team, so intergenerational. Yep. Yet none of them play footy, not even casually. And the only time I've ever seen them kick a footy, which was on the AFL Grand Final this year, because it was really shit. So we all left in the third quarter to go kick the footy instead of watching the rest of it because it was a big whitewash.
Yeah.
But besides that, they don't. However, when the Intel Extreme Masters tournament in Sydney happens, which is at Kerr Arena, which they sell 12,000 tickets, it's an international tournament series with an Australian stop. We're based, and one of our investors is Playside Studios, a 55-person games development studio. They do mobile apps as well out of Port Melbourne. And looking around, you can see the people stop playing whatever game they're playing at that period of time and then start playing Counter-Strike in the lead up to that tournament for a month, 2 months. They get caught up in the hype. They get interested. When that's done, they usually stop. They go back to another game. When the Dota 2 international tournament happens, you see the numbers spike in Dota 2, people playing and people becoming involved. There's even some games where you can watch a replay of a game happening and then you can jump in and play from that period of time in that replay against a mate. So imagine you're a massive NRL fan, you've just seen Jonathan Thurston do this awesome try that happened years ago, and then all of a sudden you can wait until he's about to do the play, and then you can snap your fingers and you're looking through his eyes and you can do that play yourself as well. It's much easier to get involved because all you need is a computer, internet connection at home, or a phone. You don't need to get 16 people together to play footy. You don't need a ground. You don't need the weather to be good. You don't need to drive to the you don't need to drive to the facility either.
Easily accessible, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That Jonathan Thurston's example you just gave me, it was kind of like, I guess, augmented reality. I suppose this is stuff that you're a tech guy, you'd be talking about and thinking about, and probably is integrated into a lot of games. I don't know.
Yeah, not yet, but it's coming.
How much of this buzz that people get is because it's kind of like molding their experience with their reality? Are we at that stage with augmented reality, with virtual reality and so forth? Or
not yet, but it will be in the future. I tried out this game called IB Cricket the other day. And they've basically got a VR cricket game that's in support with 3 IPL teams in India. And the teams over there say that it's extremely realistic in the fact that you need to be a quality cricket player to play at the top level in this actual game. So you wear a VR headset, you've got a bat that feels quite weighty, and you're waiting and you're playing the game. So not yet.
Need a 30 meter gaming room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and not like you can bowl, which is a phone, so at least you can do different bowls, so you can try to outsmart them out with them.
Yeah,
but primarily it's the game. There's other things like Haddo, which is like dodgeball. So it's an AR thing, and you can see the other people. But you've also basically got like Hadoukens in Street Fighter. You can throw like fireballs at people. You've got shields that you can pop up and things like that too. So there are these things that are starting to come into the space. But I think that that's a massive future. I mean, cycling esports is massive now too, because you don't need to travel somewhere. You can do all of the qualifier series from home, find the best players, and then you can put them in person to cycle. And it's just as hard as cycling in real life, because besides the wind resistance, you've still got the resistance of the bike, and you've still got all the physicality that go into it as well.
For sure. Well, this is all very exciting stuff for esports and the gaming community, for sure. But surely you must have pushback, maybe governmentally, or you must hear it from parents or from health organisations. I'm not really sure. But because using the example of, the young kid who can either sit inside and play a video game all day or go outside and throw a cricket ball around and kick the footy with their mates. Like if you're a parent, and I'm interested to actually ask you this, but me as a parent, I know what I would want my child doing. And you as a parent, I would love to hear what you actually think. But I find that it can't be a healthy way to spend your time. Realistically, how do you combat that? Answer that question first. What would you want your kid doing?
Yeah, for sure.
Growing up?
So So basically, my answer to that is look at all of the sports professionals that now play video games to relax in the downtime. Because there's only so many hours you can go outside before you get sunburnt or before the sun goes down. If you're training for an MMA, there's only so many rounds you can spar for. There's only so many hours per day you can lift weights, go for a run. So what we find is that I've heard a story that Rafael Nadal apparently, one of his first, or is it Federer, either of the two, one of their first requests when they come to Australian Open is a PS4 in their room with FIFA. And the days leading up to the tournament, that's all he does. He shuts inside. He doesn't want to think about the game. He wants to zone out, relax his body, and get ready for the tournament to happen.
It'd be very meditative, I think.
Yeah. So there's a certain amount of balance that needs to happen, and that's what becomes hard sometimes when there's a lot of fast food companies that might be advertising to people. And B, there's that push for it's mental, it's not physical, so you can play for longer. So an example from when I was a kid, with one of my best mates, I used to clock off work as an IT trainee at 4:30, get to his house by 5:15. We would play games non-stop until 7 a.m. Yeah. Then I would go to sleep, wake up at 1 p.m, play till 6, drive home. So and drink probably about 14 cans of Coke throughout that time as well. Usually used to
14 cans of Coke. That's the most dangerous thing of the whole. That's where you fall.
Yeah, and I would literally play until my skill had deteriorated so much because my brain couldn't process what was happening.
Your eyes had just shut down.
Yeah, like I couldn't kill anyone anymore because I had no reaction times left. That was it, and I would seriously just play till basically body collapse, which is not healthy. Yeah. So it's about educating people about that. So I've been talking to a lot of brands, and I've been talking to industry members through some of our content we've done, and the pull is the push is to get more health food brands into gaming. There is an absolute feeling. I feel like there's an unending amount of people that are into physio and similar, fitness and similar, and also mental health and coaching and similar that are trying to get into the esports market now as well, offering the services.
Well, that's good. Another problem that I see with it is the fact that so we have little monkey brains, right? That like bright things and shiny objects and loud noises and stuff. That's So obviously the iPhone's the best example of it. The iPhone is built by the smartest people in the world to capture our attention and hold it for as long as humanly possible, and they're fucking good at it. Yeah. The red notification emoji is red because that fires us up the most. If it was green, we'd be like, I'll check that later. But it fires us up. So when we're talking about the fact that we need to educate people, we need to have healthy brands coming in and so forth, and we need to do all the right things so there's a good balance in the, work, life, gaming, whatever, that somebody has. But how do you combat the fact that so the people that are building Fortnite and League of Legends and whatever all these gaming platforms and games are, games and game platforms, how do you combat the fact that what they're doing is the same? They have the smartest people in the world. They've got everyone in these corporations is earning $150,000, $200,000 a year. They're the people that are extremely good at manipulating our attention. Stealing our attention, I should say.
Yeah.
So how do you combat that? Because I think we're always going to be up against it because they're smarter than us and we don't have control of ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's true. And I agree about phones. I've done all of the same stuff with my mobile for a while. Turn on grayscale, try not to use it as possible.
Bro, I've done all that. Yeah. And I'm still on my phone all day, every day.
Exactly, yeah. And it's really hard, yeah. And I think a lot of it is, an example that we're working on at the moment with two different lifestyle and fitness style companies is to start producing content and educating people and attaching it to things they care about. So using an influencer, not to promote Maccas necessarily, but using an influencer to promote a fitness regime. There was a big thing that went viral a few years ago in League of Legends, which was an exercise regime that said, all right, every single time you die in League of Legends, do 5 push-ups. Every single time you lose a game, do 30 squats in the queue while you're waiting for the next game. There's other games that tell you to go outside over a certain period of time. And a lot of it is about that education aspect, because if you don't know, you don't know. The same way that socioeconomically, like what I learned in social work, is that if you're in a lower socioeconomic area, you're more likely to be unhealthy and to eat unhealthy food simply because you don't have the education of how to do anything else. So if I had that education as a kid growing up in Tasmania, I probably wouldn't have drunk 16 Cokes in a night playing, 14, 15 plus hours stint in Battlefield 2.
Nah, but the thing is, you probably would have. Let's be honest.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to say.
This is the issue, I feel like that's all well and good to say, if I'm a bloody 13-year-old kid and I'm playing League of Legends and I'm having a sick time and I die and it says do 5 push-ups, I say, nah, mate,
Yeah, you'd be surprised. And I guess really what I'm getting at is you need to give them a reason to care. The same way that, so talked about this in the podcast this morning. Preconceived idea is that gamers don't like to leave their bedrooms. They don't like to go anywhere. And the cliche, like in South Park, is their basement dwellers live in their grandma's basement. They eat Doritos. They drink Mountain Dew. Exactly. That's all they ever do. They don't go outside. However, you look at all the influencer meetups. FaZe Clan did a meetup at New York City, a pop-up store. A pop-up activation at a sports store, 14 city blocks. That's the line to go and see them. It got shut down by the cops because there were too many people there. The next day, just one of them in FaZe Clan went to a meetup in California. 4,000 kids turn up in 100-degree weather. They did another one. They did a FaZe Clan Kappa collab release a couple of weeks ago. They got another 6,000 people to turn up. You look at these tournaments that are selling 10 to 15 to 20,000 tickets to go to live events. So people do want to go to things, but you got to give them a reason to care. So it's the same way to how do you make an apple interesting to someone as interesting as a cheeseburger is. There needs to be a reason. So if you can use a fitness company to work with an influencer and by their name, they're influencing people. If that influencer talks about the need to take healthy breaks, how they're really into yoga, how they're really into fitness, like is becoming trendy now with a lot of the gaming influencers, then that becomes a positive influence. A really easy example is there's a guy from Poland, Counter-Strike guy, who I used to follow as a pro player because I used to play most of the same positions as him in the same game, called Pasha. That's his in-game name. And his nickname is Pasha Biceps because he's huge. And he has inspired a lot of people to go hit the gym because his arms are bigger than my head.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I understand what you're saying. There's obviously, steps that are being put in place in the right direction, but who's enforcing this? Is it governments that are enforcing it? Is it the gaming institutions that are enforcing it? Like, who's actually being held accountable so that people don't sit and play Fortnite for 17 hours a day? Because that is not healthy. Yeah,
the hard thing to understand about gaming that's different is the commerciality of it. So esports as an industry doesn't have a regulator because they're all private or public companies that have their own commercial interests. So you can't claim to be a governing body, for example, because why would EA, who's a public trading company, EA Activision in the US, listen to you in Australia? They're just going to tell you to piss off because they're so much larger than you'll ever be. The same way League of Legends is owned by Tencent, which is a tens of billions dollar company in China. The same way that other certain companies are owned by different things, right? So that's one part. So a lot of it then comes down to either the publisher themselves doing something. So League of Legends is extremely active in the school space and educating people. They've got a Learn with League program where they're educating parents and teachers and a lot of this around mental health, inclusion and physicality aspects and taking breaks from gaming, etc. They've taken that on, but other games haven't. So then it becomes to the governments that we're talking to and them saying, at the moment, they don't even understand it because they're saying, what portfolio does this fit under? Is this entertainment? Is this sport? Is this business? Is this IT? They don't even know where to begin to start off with that. Yeah. There are some countries that are quite far ahead. For example, Malaysia now has an esports commissioner as part of it, and they've got an esports strategy, so it would be up to them to look after that, and they've talked about some aspects of this in there. Or Japan as well, who have very heavy regulations on sport, do also on esports. For example, you can't run a competition with cash prizes without being accredited by their government-accredited association, the Japan Esports Association. I think that's the name, something similar, one of those kind of, one of those
So
names.
you think that's a realistic future for gaming around the world, is you would have esports organizations in each individual region or country or whatever it is, and that's kind of the governing body that makes sure that holds the gaming promoters to the standards that they should hold.
So an easy example is gambling and loot boxes. There was an Australian inquiry into loot boxes.
Yeah, I remember this.
Because a loot box is often it's basically just gambling. You buy a key, you might win the loot box, you might buy a key for $2.50 to open it, but you have a 0.2% chance of getting an in-game item that might be worth $20,000 up to. But ultimately, that's gambling. You're pulling the pokies handle in the hope that you hit the jackpot.
Actually. Yeah, I remember reading about this when it all came out. I'd never heard the concept of a loot box. Can you explain it a bit more, though?
Yeah, exactly. So if you use the example, most of it was based around Overwatch and also CSGO. Yep. So when you play a game, you might get a drop after the game. It might say, "Hey, congrats! You played a game. You've won a free in-game cosmetic item for a skin or for a hero or a map or something special like that." Sometimes you can get what's called a loot box, and it might drop. So you might get this box, and within that box, if you can open it, you've got a certain percentage to get different quality of items. You might get an item that's really rare and other people don't have. You might get an item that you can resell on a public sell space. So I might have a digital item that I can sell to you for $400 that can be purchased, or even up to 5,000 in some cases in Counter-Strike, especially in recent years. But to open that, I'll need to buy a key, which is say $2.50. So the argument from the government side is that this is gambling because you've got a loot box. The publisher doesn't publicize what percentage of likeliness you are to win each thing.
It's pokies.
And then you've got to, exactly. So that's their argument, that it's like pokies, you've got to open up. So in some countries, as far as I understand, I think Sweden has banned them entirely. Other countries make Blizzard or the developers stipulate what the percentages are, and other countries are undecided so far.
And what are we? Where are we in Australia?
That's a good question. I need to look it up. I don't think that anything has been actioned yet from the results, but someone could look it up. There's been a government there's been a government inquiry into it. So
fair enough. Knowledge. It's pretty fascinating. Not something that I would have thought about ever or known about, and did come across my computer screen it's so. I love anything that gets people fired up. Like I'm all for I love technology. I love the internet, but I hate social media. I think it's it's hugely detrimental to us as a society. I believe that. And maybe that's just because it's the real, I guess, 15 minutes of fame of other people's lives and influences and, fake boobs and fake booties and guys with big muscles. That's what's making people feel like they're less than. I think that is a big part of it. But I think another big part of it is the fact that it is stealing our time away, stealing our attention. I really feel like that's a big part of it. Is there any? I'm sure they've done studies, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you know of them or if you have any feedback. But there's a huge rise in the mental health. There's a mental health epidemic going on, effectively, and a lot of people blame social media. But along the same time, I'm not being very eloquent today. I keep messing up my words.
That's all right.
So along the same timeline, though, was the rise of esports. So is there a correlation between esports, you think, and a rise in mental health issues?
I don't think so, because I don't have any studies, obviously, about this, but some anecdotal evidence. So, for example, people who go to school and don't feel part of a friendship group because they don't enjoy the same things that other people enjoy. So a direct example is some people I know who run a university group were kind of given this girl by the psych staff at the university. And they said, look, she doesn't really have any friends. She doesn't feel like she fits in with anyone. No one has any similar things. And she's too scared to talk to anyone, lecturers, her other students, anyone like that. And it turns out she was a massive World of Warcraft fan. And so was so many people that were in that group. So they passed her to the group. She kept coming back every single week because she could talk about something that she actually liked, which was World of Warcraft. And then she came out of her shell because of that. She found other people that had similar likeness to them. Another example for me is GG Easy Bar on 99 Queen Street here. It's an esports bar. So it's a sports bar, the same way that you might see rugby AFL on all the screens. It's just got games on all of the screens. There's not really any computers to play, or any consoles to play. It's just about going there. They've got great quality, like Japanese, Australian fusion food as well. Yeah, cool. It's fantastic. Makes it easy to recommend. And good drinks and well priced. But for them too, for me, I've never enjoyed a sports bar because it's not my scene at all. I don't get along with that bloke aspect, and the same way that these people have preconceived ideas about gamers have preconceived ideas at sports bars where you go to drink VB and punch each other in the head. So I feel very at home at GG Easy Bar because I just talk the same language basically as everyone else there. I'm watching different games on the screens. There's other evidence around high school esports. There's been a very big thing in Australia and especially overseas with the company Play VS, who's raised, what is it today? Like 100 to 150 mil USD today in capital in total. And that too has helped people actually go to school, because the very simple argument that I can make for that is my friends used to skip school a lot to stay home and play games for 7 hours that day. Would you rather them do that, or would you rather them come to school for 6 hours and then play games for 1 hour of it? Because at least then they're getting 6 hours of schooling. And what they can see is that there's a lot of positive peer pressure based around that too, where these high school leagues have the teachers and the principal obviously know that the league's happening, but it's quite often primarily an after-school activity. But if they're not participating in school, if they're not turning up, they're not handing in their assignments, they can be banned from the league. They can be given a hiatus from a few games. So there's a lot of positive peer pressure then of the 4 other mates saying, "Oi, come to school because we're about to be kicked out of the tournament because you simply don't want to turn up because you want to stay home and play games."
Yeah.
So you're getting people active. So once again, it's giving. It's the way I see it is you're giving people what they want, but it's because you need to spin it in a social way. There needs to be something behind it. The same way that it was saying that if you want to promote these healthy eating alternative companies, you need to use the same kind of vehicles. You need to give them something that they care about. The same way that people don't necessarily just want to go to a skate park anymore. They don't just want to play board games. If you can get them out with the video game, but there's a good social message and actually something behind it, then you can get the interest to them.
You know what? It's a fantastic answer. But I don't know about it. I don't know about it. Well, but I agree with a lot of what you said.
Yeah.
You know, because you basically, you know, your answer was crafted around community. Yeah. Because that is really the thing that, and I always waffle on about this on this podcast whenever I can relate something to it, because I think in this whole rise of, you know, mental health epidemic, whatever it is, it's, I believe, around the fact that we don't have as tight a community as we once would, you know. So, and community is great. So, you know, if you have, I'm really enjoying, like I said, the new climbing gym that I'm at. And I've started to make some buddies down there. It's cool. I'm meeting new people. I have a weightlifting club that I'm a part of. I may play football with my brother. I haven't played football in 8 years, but he's playing this year. And I don't like the blokey bloke football environment, but I like just hanging out with people.
Yeah.
So community's huge. And I understand that there would be a tight, strong community in gaming, but it just seems too virtual to me. Because, for example, if we've got, like, this is now, right? This is now the rise of esports. Where will it be in 10 or 15 years? You know? If it's gaining traction so rapidly and it's really about to explode, and it is exploding, then I just feel like it would be unstoppable, really. I feel like esports and gaming in general will be unstoppable. It's like social media on steroids. But when we get to that point in 10 or 15 years, I just can't see that it could be a healthy. I just think there's so many issues. I mean, and all your answers have, you know, steps that are going in the right direction. But I'm very much, you know, sitting on the other side of the fence to you, and whether it's a good or bad thing.
I think it's important to see too the crossovers, that the people who play games is not the only thing they do. So the same way that you said that you do the bouldering gym plus the weightlifting, etc. So for me, I play games. I also do jiu-jitsu. And I see a lot of crossovers there with the friendliness in jiu-jitsu and why it's a welcoming community, because everyone's choking each other out. It's a very humbling sport, similar to esports. So you've got these different communities that happen, but there's also a lot of studies of crossover between certain video games and certain sports as well. So video game players and esports fanatics are very likely to be fans of single or small team sports like golf or basketball. Because, for example, with basketball, it's 5v5 on the court, similar to most esports and games, 4v4, 5v5, 6v6, some are 2v2, whatever. But you've got that similar small team aspect. Also, you can shoot hoops by yourself, the same way you can play games by yourself. So a lot of gamers, they seem to like that small team atmosphere. And similar with me, with my mates, most of the time when we hang out, there's not 15, 20 of us on a footy trip, for example. There's usually 3 to 6 of us hanging out because we can all have that talk and be part of that community.
Yeah, well, yeah. Again, I'm not trying to be negative about it. Yeah. I'm just trying to push back and play devil's advocate. Yeah, as I said, I really love tech. I just think there's a lot of issues with the rise of tech in our lives. But so, as far as, you know, I just mentioned the future, or I briefly touched on, you know, where we might be in 10 or 15 years, and I have no idea really. So, where do you think esports is heading? Like in 10 years, 15, 20 years? What's on the horizon for, you know, the community?
Look the same as traditional sports, but add in a whole bunch of content creation on top of that. So a big thing that happens in the esports space or the gaming space is that, I guess, if you look in traditional sports, right, you don't see the top stars are creating their own content. They're not getting hands-on with their fans. And that's one of the big advantages of the gaming space. So not only is a top player one of the best in the world, but often they're streaming. They're interacting with people. They're doing their own meetups. They're taking on their own sponsorship. They're going out on their own and doing interactivity and building their own little communities among the other things. They're not relying on Aston Villa to do it for them, Collingwood Football Club to do it for them, etc. So, esports has seen that meteoric rise where now it's valued at somewhere around $1 billion globally, USD. It's just going to keep growing just like traditional sports have. There's going to be more live facilities that are opening. That's a big trend at the moment around the world. There's a lot of gaming teams that now have their own up to 20,000 square foot facilities, just like traditional sports teams do. They have their offices in their production studios, but also training facilities for their teams, where they've got full-time chefs that prepare meals for them, dietitians, exercise coaches, mental coaches, etc., that are all part of those services. And then you're going to see more of the grassroots offerings come up as well, feeding into those, and more of these global leagues that are happening. For example, like the Dota 2 League, the Dota 2 International, $34.6 million prize pool, just finished in China a few months ago. Tickets sold out in 30 seconds for that. League of Legends is going into China in a big way next year. I think their finals this year was something like a 12,000 seat. It's going to be 25,000 next year. And I'll be extremely surprised if that doesn't sell out. And they'll just start going bigger and bigger from there on in. You'll see larger salaries, larger buyouts for players. For example, a buyout happened just the other day for 1.5 mil for a League of Legends player. Another League of Legends player signed a $2 to $3 million contract over 2 years. So starting to get into the real sport money sense where it's at AFL, NFL, MLS type numbers, not quite at FIFA numbers yet.
Interesting. So I'm a big UFC fan. Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're a jiu-jitsu man, so I thought you might be. So I watched every fight from UFC 32 when Dana White and his buddies bought it, up until UFC 100. I've watched every fight because I had the DVDs, the UFC 10-part pay-per-view DVDs.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, I've followed it. Basically, I've followed it quite heavily since UFC 50-odd. And then I bought the old DVDs and then watched it all the way through. And then I've been a big fan ever since. And I remember that Dana White said, we want to be the biggest sport in the world. We're going to be bigger than the NFL in 10 years. And he said that maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, they're getting
and
close.
People laughed at him.
Yeah.
They weren't even bigger than boxing then.
Yeah.
So the sport that I would say that has had the biggest meteoric rise in our generation would probably be the UFC, or mixed martial arts as the sport, and UFC is obviously the league.
Yeah.
So Dana White was laughed at 10 years ago when he said, we want to be bigger than the NFL. And now, worldwide, they probably are. In America, they're probably not. But in 10 or 20 years, judging by, I don't know anything about the trajectory, but judging from what you've told me and the very little that I do know, I feel like it's growing so fast that you could make a similar outlandish statement. But would you see that in 10 years' time or 20 years' time that, the major sports worldwide are European football, UFC, maybe NFL or NBA, and esports? Is that a fair statement on the trajectory of how fast it's growing?
Yeah, for sure. And remember, it's important to remember that esports is a category. So underneath esports, you got League of Legends, Fortnite, etc.
Yeah, each game or each sport.
But if you look at
some
of the numbers, for example, Fortnite, their league for their Fortnite World Cup for this year, $100 million prize pool as a whole. They went to how many acres was the facility? It was like a multiple acre facility where the global finals were. And they've got people there like Ninja, who has 7 million Twitter followers. They've got people there like FaZe Clan, whose FaZe's Instagram account has 7 million followers. They're invested in by Offset, who's Cardi B's husband. They've got NFL players. They've got Ben Simmons is one of their main ambassadors.
Who's got the biggest following, social media following worldwide in esports?
For an esports team, FaZe by like 100-fold. But not literally 100-fold, but literally probably 5-fold. The hard difference is where you're crossing over the lines between esports and gaming. What is esports? What is gaming? So if you're an influencer that plays in some tournaments, but that's not really your goal. You're more streaming. Are you esports? Are you gaming? And that's where FaZe is blurring the lines a lot, which is why they're getting that 14 city blocks at New York City to their meetup.
So FaZe is a team.
Yeah, FaZe Clan is a team.
And what are we talking like Instagram, Twitter, and so forth followers?
So FaZe as just the organization has 7 million Instagram followers, 7.1, but most of their top guys, like 15 of their guys, will each have over 1 million each, for example. Yeah,
that's kind of how I look at global reach and how big something or someone is. Like you can look pretty closely at UFC fighters, NBA players, and it's got a real clear-cut definition of how popular and how worldwide.
Same advice they give for games. So when you want to figure out how big a game is, look at their social following.
Exactly. You know, like, and I'll use NBA for example. LeBron has 54 million, I think. Steph Curry might have 14 million, and then like Kevin Durant is 8 million.
Yeah.
So if you look at, and then it's like 4, 3, 1, 1, 1. So once you're 5 people removed from the top, the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th most followed social media athlete in the NBA, you're at that level where the esports individuals are already.
And if
1 million, which is pretty crazy to think about.
And some other stuff too, like Offset. When he invested in there, he did
this is Cardi B's dude.
Yeah, he did some content based around it too, and played NFL with some of the FaZe people in the house. So FaZe have 2 20-bedroom mansions in LA next door to each other, and that's where they live. There's Clout Gang in one, they're called, which is mainly the YouTubers, and then FaZe Clan in the other one. He said, I gained 200,000 Instagram followers in a day by saying I was involved with FaZe. So there's that transfer coming back in the other direction now as well. Even if you look at the wider younger market, Will Smith is on TikTok because no kids know who he is anymore. Like you talk to like one of my employees, he talked to his younger brothers and stuff. He showed them Chris Hemsworth, don't know who that is. Showed them Terry Crews, I don't know who that is. Will Smith, I don't know who that is. They know some people as the Bird Box lady, the man that plays Thor. They know like, did that guy play Spider-Man? But they don't actually know who these people are anymore because they're not relevant to them whatsoever. They don't care. They want to watch the movie because it's really cool, but they don't care about who's behind it because the way that it's the opposite now is the accessibility, like I was saying with gaming and esports. It used to be in the past, an actor and actress was cool because you'd only see them once a year and there's no way you could ever talk to Hugh Jackman. But now, like one of the TikTok people we work with, Jade, who's based in Canada, she's 18, she makes 7 pieces of content per day. She does 3 TikToks, she posts on Instagram, she does stories, she's on Twitter, she's on YouTube, she's on LinkedIn, because people want to get access to her. They want to be able to ask her questions. They want to be able to interact with her.
They want more real people.
Exactly.
They want more behind the scenes, more candid. That's why podcasting's so huge and so popular.
Yeah.
Because it's real.
Yeah, and that's why like I keep unsubscribing to Audible all the time because I always ask myself that question. Is it worth paying this when I can listen to podcasts? When Joe Rogan will have the person who wrote the book on. Should I just listen to that for free? Or should I listen to Sam Harris, or should I listen to a marketing podcast, or should I listen, depending on what I'm feeling like at that time? Do I need to pay however many dollars a month for Audible when I can just listen to the people talk on these podcasts for free?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating how quickly celebrity and everything is changing. I looked at, I went to a TikTok talk at my co-working space in QV in the middle of the city, and it was basiced an influencer marketing agency talking about the rise of TikTok.
Oh, I wanted to go to that, but I had to miss it. Yeah, I had a meeting on.
Yeah, it was all right. It's pretty interesting, but they were talking about the fact that as far as the social media trends go, kids under 18 years of age aren't on Facebook whatsoever.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah, and very anti-Facebook too.
Yeah. Instagram is like 4th on the social media usage under 18. I'm also butchering some of these statistics, obviously. Yeah. But it was as actual eyeballs and minutes spent on any social media app under 18 years of age, TikTok's number 1.
Yeah.
That's fucking insane. And YouTube is still massive. And then I'm not sure what number 3 was, but I think YouTube was number 2. But yeah, it's a funny way the world is just changing so rapidly. And I believe that, real old school celebrities, old fashioned celebrity movie stars and so forth aren't really a thing. And you can see it in Hollywood blockbusters. They just are way more few and far between. They're not coming out anymore. And now it's all streaming. It's all television and it's all streaming, Netflix, all the big movie stars are all now the big Netflix stars and the big Stan stars and they'll be the big Disney Plus stars and for all their unique pieces of content. So fascinating world we live in. But from your bio, I noticed that, you're very tech heavy and you've written about tech before in the past and so forth. So outside of gaming for a second, what's got you most fired up about tech in general and the future of the society that we live in?
It's really hard to say. Like talking not so much just about technology as a platform, but about TikTok is something that I got a lot of interest in. So Jade, who I mentioned, we're doing a project together. We're bringing in a lot of other talent because like you were saying before, the attention economy is really interesting to me. The fact that Jade, with 1.2 million views on TikTok, gets 68 million video views a month, and she did a meetup in Alberta where she lives at a Westfield. She got 2,000 kids to turn up, and some of the kids were crying because they got to meet her. And at that stage, she'd only been making content for 6 months, so she was a massive celebrity in their eyes. That kind of stuff is very interesting to me. As far as like the whole technology goes, for me, solar, batteries, and electric cars. Electric cars is something that's really interesting to me. Someone who's been using electric push bikes for, I don't know, probably 20 years was the first time my dad made one with a wheelchair motor and a car battery on a bike, and used to make his own bikes and stuff. That's always been really, really interesting to me around that kind of technology. Yeah, green technology.
Interesting. Yeah, actually, just on the TikTok thing, just to wrap it up, I actually don't mind it. I think it's a lot healthier than Instagram. If we have to have, I mean, it seems to me, it's funny. It's just little. Can you be creative? Creativity is great. If you've got a creative Instagram, no worries. I totally, I follow lots of people on Instagram, and lots of brands and so forth. And creativity is one of the great things in life, really. But where Instagram went wrong is it just went aesthetic, everything's aesthetic. And that's, not good for people. But TikTok, I don't really use it very often. I have used it. I have an account and so forth. I've never posted. But it's, as far as something that's going to steal our attention, it's certainly a lot better than Instagram, because it seems fun, and it's promoting creativity and humour, I feel like. That's really, they're just like little 10-second snippets of something that can make you laugh. Yeah. Which is certainly not the worst thing in the world. Yeah, cool. Well, Chris, what about the future for you? What's your, where do you want to go with all this stuff?
Sure. So there's a few things we're focusing on at the moment. Number one is TikTok and the work we're doing around that space. Number two is implementing some cool strategy and different ways of marketing thinking with companies and how they can own their own products rather than using influencers or sponsoring other things. So it's interesting to bring out the UFC. That's one party who we're talking with at the moment about bringing some of their ideas into esports and some of the esports ideas into them, especially around monetization for athletes that aren't at the top, that aren't Conor McGregor, that aren't earning the big bucks. And we're also doing a lot of work with sport and gaming. There's an unending amount of sports teams and leagues, etc., not just in Australia but around the world, that are saying, how can we maintain relevance to this younger market? A lot of them have a couple of problems that they're coming to us with. Number one is an aging market. The PGA Tour average fan is 61 years old. AFL somewhere in the mid-30s.
Harley-Davidson as a brand is going through the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas, UFC and basketball are the only ones that aren't really having that problem. However, they have different problems. For example, getting people in before the bounce. That's a really hard one for the AFL, not so much for basketball or UFC, because basketball, like in Australia, sells out most of the time anyway. For some of the bigger teams, and UFC, they never have problems selling Madison Square Garden or anywhere. But for them, it's digital. It's maintaining relevance. It's helping more people make money throughout their chain and diversifying their income streams. If you're the Adelaide Crows, for example, who bought an esports team a few years ago, they've basically capped out their market. There's only so many people that live in Adelaide, and they've got lots of members. So they're like, well, what do we do next? We've reached our skill ceiling. We've reached our money ceiling. We can't grow the country. We can't grow our state necessarily. So we need to look to some other pastures. And there are a few different things we're talking to different sports about how they can interact with gaming. And once again, give the kids what they want, which might be Fortnite, but get them in there and then educate them about basketball, about golf, about tennis, about whatever sport. They're there at the same time, but using that as the draw card. The same way that a parent will say, I'll give you a lolly if you're good. They want the lolly, but they're going to be good to get it. The same way that you want to get into the sport, come and play some Fortnite, meet some influencers you actually care about, stick around, and you might then transfer to become a fan of whatever sport is that's there at the same time.
Well, Chris, mate, I wish you all the best. You're a very well put together dude. I feel like if anyone is going to be leading the push, you're the man for the job. I'm obviously, as it sounded in this, I'm a little bit pessimistic about the whole idea and the whole future. But I hope you prove me wrong, and I hope it blows up for your sake and for all the people that love it and so forth. So, quickly before we wrap it up, where can people find you? Anything you want to plug? Links, social media, website, so on and so
Sure.
forth.
So for me, just at Smithy Mayo on all platforms, which is half my last name, half my gaming name. And then also a company, bigesports.gg, online as well. Been using LinkedIn a lot lately as well to share a lot of information, and found that to be the best social media in a long time I've been involved with, besides the interest of TikTok. LinkedIn being able to actually positively connect with people and not just share pictures or something like that. You find that it's often a self-regulating audience where if someone shares crap, people will kind of call it out as so.
Yeah.
So I've found a very interesting community on there too.
Cool. Well, Chris, thanks for coming on the show. And that's a wrap.